Andy, one of the things I've gotten used to more often than not is, like a mouse, right? Like not one of the rodents or anything like that, but your computer mouse, right?
Yes.
And like your trackpad is very important if for most times, but I found not having my mouse for my Windows computer is really frustrating. And so I'm traveling this week, Andy. I'm in beautiful San Diego. It's a really nice area. Never been here before, but I'm trying to do some work in the meantime. On my Mac, no problem with my mouse
Yeah.
or with my trackpad. On my Windows computer, awful time. And especially when I'm trying to use two monitors and drag things over, just makes it very frustrating, Andy. I know these are first world problems, Andy, but I've got them and it's frustrating.
Legit problems, legit problems. I do not have the mental agility to go back and forth between Apple and Windows. If I stand in front of a Windows computer, I just freeze up and get like lost on why things aren't working the way I want them to work. I can't handle it. I become completely like it's like I've never seen a computer before, and I just sit there staring at the screen, like sadly waiting for somebody to come help me. It takes me like a good few minutes to figure out, oh, things are backwards here, and I hate it. I hate it. I don't have that mental agility. So if the mouse is your only problem, you're doing way better than me. And yeah, first world problems for sure.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I'm definitely more of a Mac person on the personal side now, but I do have this Windows computer and it just
I'm
drives me
like, do you remember, Dave, that 90s song, Return of the Mac? Do you remember that song?
crazy.
That's something that's in my head right now, right? Return of the Mac. That was a great song. That was a great song. That was God bless the 90s, Dave. God bless Gen
God,
X.
God bless Gen X, Andy. That's exactly right. So, all right, Andy, a couple things to start off on a Monday. It is really early for me, so I'm a little groggy, but I'm powering through, Andy. I'm getting there.
America thanks you. America, Dave, America thanks you for your contributions at 2:30 or whatever it is right now in San Diego. Thank
And
you.
I'm doing it for our listeners, Andy. Andy, our listeners keep going up. I think they're loving our content, Andy. It's because we deliver this great stuff. And on that note, Andy, last week we had fun with some movie titles, right?
Yeah.
What is and what is not. Mostly because the movies industry has been really struggling, and it by struggling it means like I did that because like most of the movies people don't even are very low budget. They're low targeted audiences. There's not anything huge. Well, last weekend we I should have mentioned it. Dune Part 2
Yeah.
or Dune 2, it came
Dave,
out.
real movie. Real movie. Are we playing? Are we still testing? It's real movie.
Real movie, real movie. Came out and it killed at the box office. I mean, it did over 175 million, which is back in the heyday era of what of some of these movies. And not only did it like wildly popular, but like critically, everyone is loving this movie.
Yeah,
Um, and now the Dune. Well, first of all, did you see the first Dune,
I
Andy?
did. I did. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I thought it was there was a little slowness in the beginning, but I really just enjoyed it. It's not something I think I'd go back and watch over and over again, but I mean, I did enjoy it. I like Timothy Chalamet, Wonka, and I also love Rebecca Ferguson, who is a goddess. I mean, she's my new crush, I think. But Dune Part 2 did really well at the box office. So, any thoughts on that, Andy?
Well, what I think is cool, Dave, is one, I like seeing sci-fi movies do well because there's a time when they weren't really as hot as they were. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, like there's some great sci-fi. Growing up, I mean, like just recently, I think The Last Starfighter celebrated
Oh yeah,
40
yeah.
years, right? And we grew up with like just a lot of like really fun sci-fi to include many don't like Dune. Dune was done in the 80s and done well in the 80s. It's cool to see it, brought back to life now. I like the fact that there's, new young actors in it that are doing well. I like that sci-fi is getting a look by a new generation of viewers. And the first one, I mean, my only complaint about the first one was it was obviously setting up a second movie. And I felt
Yeah.
like, unlike sort of, some of the series that we see, I didn't feel like it really stood alone really well. I felt like it was almost just like pause, intermission, come back and see part two, which I didn't love that aspect of it. But the movie itself was done very well. and I enjoyed it. I think I might go back and see it to appreciate the two of the movies together at some
Mm.
point. I think really probably deserve to be watched, in close proximity to each other. But I think it's great. I really think it's great to see the movie do well. Likable actors, cool story, and hey, anything. Let's get a Last Starfighter revival. That's what I want to see. We've seen Star Wars. Star Trek continues all over the place. We've done Blade Runner. We've done Mad Max, which is terrible, kind of in both incarnations. Let's see the Last Starfighter brought back.
Yeah, I that was an interesting, and there's been some, I guess, rip-offs of that little
Yeah,
video game thing go into like the real world. But Last Starfighter, I forgot about that one movie. I remember a friend of mine from Germany, Derek Kane, where if Derek Kane's one of our loyal listeners out there,
here's
please
Derek.
check him out. But he brought me and my twin brother into Last Starfighter, and it was quite cool. It was quite fun. That would be a neat one to see back for I guess for the masses, I guess, or even just the cult side of it. But Andy, if you do like Dune Part Two or Dune Two, whatever they're calling it, you will have to wait about 3 years for the last part of it. I think it's called Dune Messiah,
Yeah.
or something. That I'm sure the name will change around a little bit, but it'll be a couple more years to you have to wait. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Um, we get too I think too often we get rushed into making these sequels and stuff, and they turn out to be less than we expect. So it will be interesting to see. Good for Dune, good for the movies. Hopefully more will come, but I doubt it will. So all
Dave,
right.
two quick thoughts with
Yeah.
that. One, on you started talking about Starfighter, brought me back to it. If I recall, we were watching the last Starfighter. One of my most traumatic experiences growing up. My brother had a birthday party. He was a few years older than me. Had all his buddies over. I was hanging out with him, getting ready to watch. I think the last Starfighter. When I experienced my first full moon, and I'm not talking about the one in the sky, Dave. I'm talking about a sixth grader hopping down the stairs, me completely unsuspecting, seeing the whitest butt I'd ever seen in my life, completely exposed and spread open as he mooned all of us. I will never forget that experience because it traumatized me. So that's the kind of nonsense sleepover action that I think kids miss out on today. Traumatic, and it's still a fun memory because sleepovers were awesome when we were kids growing up. Two, we actually took in a couple movies this weekend because we had time in the evening and we're dialing out. My oldest son was home and we like to enjoy a nice dinner and watch a movie when he's home. Went and watched once again a movie he'd never seen. My wife hadn't seen it in its entirety before. The 2005's Wedding Crashers.
Oh my, what,
Oh,
wait a second. Your
oh,
son had never seen that movie?
he'd never seen it, Dave. He saw it. I mean, what a
What?
great movie. I mean, you got Vince Vaughn, right? Baba Ganoush out there, right? Like, I love that guy. Owen Wilson was
Owen
just
Wilson.
tremendous. But Dave, come on, Chaz, are you
Oh,
kidding me right now? I mean, one of Will Ferrell's shortest but best. I mean, that movie kills. You shut your mouth when you're talking to me. I love that movie. It was great to watch it again and to laugh with my wife and son taking that in. That's a great one. And I just want to throw that out there because we're talking some pretty lousy movies that are coming out these days, some good ones. That's a great one. Almost 20 years old.
and that's a movie, and Bradley Cooper's also in that. Christopher Walken. They both play great roles. I think Ferrell, two parts. Will Ferrell is in those smaller roles. I think
So good.
he's so good. I mean, he does so many of those things in whatever in it, whether it's on TV shows or in movies. He's so good on that kind of stuff.
You almost got
But
nunchucked.
yeah, I know, but they don't make that movie today, Andy.
No,
Like
oh, no
that
way.
movie
No
can't
way.
get made today. They like the opening sequence where they're going around just picking up women, all like and
Oh,
just
yeah. Yeah.
flaunting around naked all over the place. Like that movie cannot get made today, and it's a shame because it's generally a fun movie. Like
Super
yes,
fun.
they have to do things differently. Yeah, sure, okay, we all are sensitive to that. But I tell you, what a great movie. I just love the Will Ferrell sequence of going to funerals and picking
Oh
up.
my gosh.
Dude,
It's insane. It's insane.
he's killing it, by the way.
Yeah. More for the rest of us, man. More for me and you.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, it was hilarious. And I'm a Vince Vaughn fan, and him and Wilson together were
Yeah.
such a duo for a while there, you know. So yeah, I loved it. So
Yeah,
it
they
was good.
they had that thing with Old School, all those other type of movies. All there was a 5 year period where
Yeah.
they put out like hit after hit after hit. Good stuff. Maybe we should need to do a deep dive into that one time, Andy.
We might have to do that. We might have to do that. So I just want to throw that out there. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Great movie, Wedding Crashers. Strong recommend.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Most people have seen that already. I'm disappointed you haven't shown it to your son before. Okay, Andy, let's do a quick sports check-in. How'd you do over the weekend? Look, NFL free agency is March 13th, so we're a little over a week away.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about your Lions? I mean, what are your needs here, Andy? What do you need to see happen in free agency, or are you content with where you're at?
No, not content, Dave. Never content. You can be happy, but never content. I'll tell you, I mean, one thing I've really realized in the last few years, but especially I think the last 2 seasons, as I stand here in my NFL championship T-shirt today, I've become that guy that really the NFL never ends for me. We kind of talked about this before, but that's really the only sport I'm paying attention to most of the time, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. And so it's been fun doing listen to the offseason. I've got a Lions podcast I listen to almost every day. Matt Derry, great show, great Locked On Lions show. But I like keeping up with what's happening in the offseason and hearing like who's interesting at the Senior Bowl, who's coming up in the combine, some fun stuff at the combine this weekend, and then free agency. You've got I mean you've got everybody from Chris Jones to Mike Evans out there, and you think these guys are going to sign with their teams, but maybe not. And you're like, well, hey, Mike Evans would be a great Detroit Lion, right? We've got all the things he's looking for in his new team, right? A contender, great quarterback, competitive. You're like everybody is excited in this time of the year, and by the time we wrap up the draft, everybody thinks their team is poised for the Super Bowl. Here's what I think: the Lions, honestly, great GM Brad Holmes is taking things smartly, and every indication is the Lions are not content and really want to sign the right people, re-sign the right people, plug in those one or two critical players, and make a true push to get and win the big game. It's exciting. It's exciting. So it's fun to watch again. Every fan thinks their team's about to win the Super Bowl at this time of the year. But of course, Detroit is correct. One pride is correct. The Lions are going to win.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting. I mean, Kirk Cousins is also out there. There's
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
pretty good free agents. It'll be
sure.
interesting if Cousins can recover from his Achilles. He had an Achilles, and then come back and play. I mean, for as much as that guy gets crapped on, and sometimes, I mean, the guy does keep winning, and he does throw up a lot of stuff. I mean, it's interesting.
A super nice guy, like I've mentioned before, and he
Yeah,
used to sometimes attend the church I used to attend. Good guy, decent guy, likable, better than he gets credit for, but also like the biggest dork. You know what I mean? Which is what makes him so funny. Like, did you see the recent picture of him like getting his grill?
yeah, yeah,
It's moments like that when you're like, Kirk Cousins, you are absolutely a dork. Like you are such a geek. And it's fun. It's like it's somehow endearing, right? You've got this very
yeah.
good athlete, super nice guy, complete goof. Like he's likable. So I don't know where he ends up, to be honest. I think he resigns in Minnesota, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But he's talented, and on the back end of his career now. Interesting to see where he goes.
Yeah, and I think for some teams, I mean, again, the people will say he puts up a lot of stats and can't win or whatever. I think a lot of teams would take what they know in Kirk Cousins. I mean,
Yeah,
this is a guy who he's consistently putting up these
yeah.
numbers. I mean, like there's a lot of teams who have bad quarterbacks right now, and they could be better with Kirk Cousins.
Oh yeah, if Washington had just re-signed him back when they were goofing around with franchise tag year after year, like Washington's entire, they would have 5 or 6 very different seasons if they were able to make that commitment. So no, he's better than is appreciated. He's a legit NFL starting quarterback.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. Andy, for me, I don't really care, Andy. Like I'm out of the Cowboys until we get to playoff win number one or number two or where. Like I just can't. I'm not going to just do
Sure,
it to myself.
sure.
So do whatever you want, Cowboys. It doesn't matter. Your proof is in the pudding. Win as many games as you want in the regular season, Cowboys. It doesn't matter to me.
Fair,
Just
fair take.
different spaces. Andy, I did enjoy some of the other sports activities. Like the Orioles are really, the spring training is going on, and there was a little bit of Like, can the Orioles really do this 101 wins again? I mean, they've had two winning seasons in a row. Can they keep this high upside up? And look, spring training is no single indicator of how you're doing, but they're 9-1.
Yeah.
And I think it's not about that they're 9-1 because the record doesn't mean anything and they could be 1-9 to start the regular season. I think it just shows like the depth, like spring training is about your depth within your organization. And the Orioles just have a ton of people who are not going to make the major league roster this year, but are trying to fight and play. And I think that bodes well for them as they get into the season. They'll be able to trade some of those pieces away for other proven players who may be able to help them in the long run. So I'm very encouraged where we're at
Yeah.
uh, from the Orioles standpoint. So that'd be fun. I'm excited for regular season to start there. Spring training is always fun, but it does go a little bit too long that time. So, anyways, so good stuff.
Good stuff, fun stuff. Baseball season is exciting for a lot of people. I'll never understand it, but I'm glad that you and others get to enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah, I try. So it's one of those things you keep on the background and it doesn't get my anxiety up much more anymore. So, all right, Andy, let's transition to other things. All right, two quick ones, Andy. One, Nikki Haley won her first primary. I think it was last night. I think
Yeah,
was
that's right. That's right.
she won the ever impressive Washington D.C. Did we make anything out of that, Andy? What do you think?
Oh, I just think, I mean, she's probably going to get beat up here on Super Tuesday, right, tomorrow. But I think what the DC win shows is that's sort of the political insider class, many of whom have worked with or know, the candidates, right? And so while it's not representative of the Republican Party by any means, it is kind of more indicative of where non-hardcore dedicated Trump voters are, and so I think I think it gives Nikki Haley a sliver of hope, and maybe bolsters that case for potentially being that no labels third party candidate and offering that alternative, because there are people that will vote for her over Donald Trump. They're just not those folks that are voting in the Republican primaries and caucuses right now, and the hardcore base, and that's where politics are, right? These parties have drifted to their respective camps so far that the primaries are just a small part of the electorate deciding who the candidates are. That's part of why we have such crappy candidates, right? And that's why I like the idea of open primaries, because you get a more moderate, reasonable, acceptable candidate. So I think it does kind of make the case of, hey, maybe America would consider Nikki Haley if they have the option. I think that's one interesting part about it. Otherwise, hey, nice to get your first win. Might be your only one. Good to see. And Trump's first loss in this primary season. Tomorrow, Super Tuesday will be interesting and probably dominated by the Donald Trump machine is what it looks like.
Yeah, definitely agree. It's going to be dominated by Trump, but I tell you what is, but I do think it is mildly encouraging just for Nikki to keep hanging around a little bit longer because the more and more Trump gets on the stand and talks to places, I don't mean the legal stand, I mean just the podium at these whatever I guess engagements that he's got out there on the primary circuit, the more hardcore he's going, the more extreme he's going. I mean, he's doubled down and say MAGA is 100% of the Republican Party now. And I
Yeah,
think that's the really dangerous position for him because what he's doing is alienating any of the moderates that he's had that may have been wanting to stay with him. Um, because they are Republicans. So basically, he's saying we don't want any of the moderates. We don't want any of that middle area, the Mitt Romneys or any of those individuals. And I think it's a potentially look, it works great for the primary. It's hard to walk that back in the general election then because you're on the record. Now, I know Donald is Teflon Don, and not a lot sticks to him, or people just don't care because they think somehow it'll be a little bit different. But he is going a lot harder in these engagements. The election was stolen. All this is fraud. All I'm being a witch. All these things that he keeps saying. But now he's calling out that we don't need the moderates, and I think that's a dangerous position for him. So if I think for how it plays in with Nikki is if she can just keep hanging around and if she does get on one of these third party areas, it could make things interesting. Now we still have the electoral college that, again, that is what it is. It's not a popularity, we don't elect based on, the most number of votes. We elect on the most number of electoral college delegates. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Um, Andy, another topic to talk to is something came out in Reason. I know that's one of your favorite areas, talking about the politics of, in a lot of respects, talking to the politics of fear, which
Yeah.
Trump, which many, all candidates play to some levels of fear. I mean, if you go back into the 60s or whatever, the always ever popular countdown, political ad where the nuclear explosion or whatever is, and then of course you had the ad about, it's 2 o'clock. Do you know where, I'm spacing on all these ads now. But anyways, we played to the politics of fear over and over. And one of the things, of course, now is the big immigration crisis. And Reason came out and talked to that a little bit, and how actually, all these crime wave statistics that have been, or saying all these allegations that, the immigrants only come here to commit crime, and they're only going to come here and make things worse, actually really isn't that true.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate a little on that, Andy?
Well, I think to put some context on it, to elaborate a little bit, and Fiona Harrigan did a really good job here in Reason talking about this. She covers a lot of immigration issues for Reason, but you know, Donald Trump and the Republican Party right now are screaming about insane crime, right? And how it's not only is crime, if you listen to Donald Trump, like horribly bad, but it's the bloody immigrants that are doing it, right? And you can see articles like that in different traditionally conservative media. Sort of anytime a immigrant or non-resident alien, illegal alien, we're going to call it, commits a crime, like that's part of the headline, right? Illegal commits murder or whatever it is, and so there's this like push of drama around this idea, but the reality is that's not reality, right? So I mean, one, the New York Times did a good study back in January looking at the murder rate, and one, over since 2000, I mean, the murder rate is down so far from where it was in the late 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, where it was much higher. It really came crashing down the 2000s, and then surged again, going into COVID, and in COVID, and I saw its worst numbers as Donald Trump was still in office, worst numbers in this century, and those numbers are way down, right? They're still not at their lowest of this century. They've actually fallen a lot in 2023. So the sort of the story of mass crime isn't really genuine. It's actually just a fabrication and wrong. What Fiona talks about is the idea that migrant crime is so terrible is also wrong, right? She said, I mean, yeah, immigrants conduct heinous crimes, like everybody of every stripe, color, political belief, persuasion, religion, like, yeah, like that's true. But on the whole, crime is down. In some of the states that have played up the crime issue so much, like Texas, crime is down, right? And for all their shipping of immigrants around the country, immigrants are not responsible for most of the crime in Texas. And a good stat. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was said by the Cato Institute that uh, there's a lot of incomplete data, and immigrant crime is still far less than Native American crime, right? So you've got this story being written by Trump and his supporters. This isn't actually based on facts on the ground, and that's documented, and isn't true of our general situation in this country, right? Crime is not horrible. Things are not terrible. That story should be told. Reason did a good job here. Fiona did a good job telling that story. Others have painted that picture as well. I just don't think some of Trump's supporters are willing to see that that's reality.
Well, they're definitely not willing. Well, it's these news headlines, right, Andy?
Yeah,
The one girl that was killed, unfortunately, by an immigrant. The
yeah,
one instance that they're going to latch on to
yeah.
is getting national headlines, and that's causing. See, I told you. See, I told you. This is happening. But again, let's overreacting to one incident. How, regardless of how awful it is for the
Yeah. And
families
it is
involved,
awful. And it is
it's
awful.
awful. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But I mean that level of, I don't know. I think that's a challenge, right? We have to, and that's where I keep coming back on this dis, and malinformation.
Yeah.
Again, not to say this is disinformation, but it is misleading. I mean, it is to say, look, this incident occurred, but it's not indicative of a larger problem, and they're making it sound like it is that larger problem. You
Yeah.
have to sift through the numbers. You have to do your own research if you're doing this. I pound on this all the time in my day job on a security perspective, but you have to be able to challenge what is being said. And if you're going to be able to just as easily go on and spout off an opinion on social media, at least have your information correct. So,
And be willing to challenge not just what you want to challenge, but also the things that we all believe too, right? Whatever
right.
whatever we think is just like this is fact. Maybe it's not fact. Check
Yeah.
your premises, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be an interesting time. I mean, obviously, Super Tuesday is going to be a huge indicator of where we're at. I think we all know where we're at. I just, but there are some things here. So is the foundation potentially creaking underneath both Biden and Trump? You know, I don't think any of that will be apparent until we get to any sort of convention, but the both sides are making their play on why they feel that they'll be best to run the country. I
Yeah.
just like listen to Donald Trump for 5 minutes on those podiums, and like you can't honestly say like this is real, right? I mean, but here we are. So, what's the line from Star Wars? And this is how democracy dies to the thought, to the
That's right.
applause,
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly
yeah,
right. That's exactly
to
right.
thunderous applause or whatever like that. So, again, I'm not going to change we're not men of a certain X. Democracy dies in darkness, like the Washington Post did several years ago. There you go, Washington Post. Stick it to the man. Democracy dies in darkness. You journalists sometimes, I tell you what. Okay, Andy, anything else for this Monday to kick off the week here?
Hey, just a couple of interesting political items, Dave. You talked about, listening to Trump on the stage. Saturday, he once again sort of garbled his words. Nobody knew what he was saying when it sounds like he said something along the lines of Venezuela. And then people are like, what in the world is he? So interesting to see. There's a petition circulating on social media right now from medical professionals, therapists, and others saying, hey, just want to say that from every observation we have, this man's clearly suffering from dementia. Just funny to see that kind of thing going around. And I don't know if he has dementia or not. He's definitely, not stable. Also interesting, David, we talked last week, I think, about the Michigan primary, how really the results from that now have got some saying, hey,
Yeah.
maybe there is a legitimate third party opportunity in Michigan and maybe more broadly around the country. And, with that, former Republican, former Libertarian Justin Amash announced that he is going to pursue the Republican nomination for the Senate in Michigan. I'm a fan of his. I've been a fan of his for a long time. And interesting to see him take this opportunity to, one, jump back into the Republican Party. He's been at opposite ends of the discussion than Donald Trump and then taking some heat from the former president. So to see him coming back to the Republican Party to make this run and an interesting opportunity for him. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. He's never lost a congressional race. We'll see if this is another one that he can win or not. But it definitely, people are curious around the country right now about their options. I think his reentry is one example. Marianne Williamson coming back into the Democratic primary. I've never actually seen a candidate unsuspend a campaign in my life, but she has. In fact, I think she
Based on 3% of the vote, Andy. 3% of the vote.
in Michigan. But back to your argument about a contested convention, I think both Haley and Williamson say maybe, right? Maybe there's a chance here that these two guys aren't going to make it. So I think again, there's a desire for something different in America. I think we're seeing that play out in the primaries, in third party options, in some of the candidates that are running or are now rerunning. It's interesting times, Dave. Interesting times for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Marianne Williamson. 3% is not quite the 30% that Haley's been getting or what. But yes, fun to look. I think a contested convention is in play. I definitely am excited to see it for the drama, if nothing else. Otherwise, conventions suck. So,
Yeah, I
um,
agree.
all right, Andy, I think we've covered a lot of ground on this Monday. Good to be back in the saddle with you on this podcast. And Andy, I'll catch up with you next time.